Hello and welcome to episode 1338 of The Sleeper and the Bust. It is Thursday, September 5th. I'm your host, Paul Sporer, joined this afternoon by Justin Mason. Justin, good day.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I forgot on Friday when I said see you on Monday about the holiday. My fault. But we're not leaving you empty this week. We got 2 episodes today and tomorrow. And today we're going to look forward a little bit beyond. Well, it's kind of both. It's a review, and then I'm obviously going to ask you how you feel about these guys going forward. But it's 10 rookie hitters, the highest volume rookie hitters as of now. And of course, things can change, but there's a reason I cut it off on the volume piece is because all 10 of these guys have put up at least 450 plate appearances, right? We've got an idea. Doesn't mean that they can't change and or improve or hurt their status for next year, but we have a general idea of how we feel about these guys for next year. So let's dive in and talk about these guys, how you felt this year and where you're at next year. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Let's start with perhaps the NL Rookie of the Year. No, I'm actually not talking about Paul Skeens for once. And through no fault of his own, I think he's been chased down by one Jackson Merrill. 22 homers, 16 stolen bases, 294 average, and a $25 player rater for 15 teamers. Player rater value, I should say. That's incredible. And what really does it for me over Skeens, and again, not really faulting Skeens, more promoting Merrill here, is the volume of doing it from day one. I think I even mentioned this recently. You know, he's there in Korea all the way back on March 22nd or whatever. And that's not something that Skeens can control, but you still do get credit for it if you're Merrill. So I'm not so concerned on where you're at on the Rookie of the Year. You can give your thoughts there. But where were you on Merrill coming into the year? Before we spin it forward to 25, was he somebody you liked? Because it was clear he was going to make the team by the time we were doing our biggest drafts. Jackson Merrill, where you at?
Yeah, I was not in on Merrill, not because I didn't like him as a player, but mostly because I was unsure about what the playing time situation was going to look like throughout the season. I mean, there was a lot of talk early on in the season they were going to add Tommy Pham, that they, could bring in other pieces, that he was switching positions. He had never really played.
That's actually what sold me, was the position change. When Merrill went to center field, I'm like, oh, they're getting this guy in no matter. And again,
but center field is such a tough position to just learn on the fly that I was afraid.
But maybe not so much for a shortstop.
Yeah, maybe not. And clearly not.
You could have learned from that. But this dude's just another level. And listen, I don't have a ton of shares, so I'm not going back and saying like, oh, I had him everywhere. I did like him. I wrote him up in the Dynasty redraft prospect article I do during Prospect Week. And he didn't even get a full profile. I had him in the others. This was before the season started and everything. I said, hey, they've been dabbling with him in the outfield. Keep tabs on it because this dude can really hit. Fast forward, and we're talking about what, like a 4th rounder, 5th round? He's 4 steals away from 2020, so he might not get that. Although with the way steals are these days, he might chase it the way Randy Arozarena did when he was close. And he's 16 for 19 too, so they're certainly not going to slow Jackson Merrill down. So yeah, let's spin it forward. Are you thinking 4th, 5th roundish? I'm going to pull up the Deadpool Hitter podcast draft that they did because I want to see where Merrill went. Merrill actually went pick 49. So there you go, 3rd round.
Yeah, I mean, 3rd, 4th, 5th round sounds about right, especially as pitching stays high. The thing about Merrill is, like I said, exactly what I thought he would be if he got full-time playing time, which is kind of a premium accumulator, right? Just hits. He doesn't have necessarily a carrying tool for fantasy, but he just does everything.
Not to interrupt you, but also to interrupt you, only because batting average is tough to bank on.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think he has a carrying tool as a hit tool that is plus, but the vagaries of BABIP, we see it all the time. There's only a few guys who are immune to it, and truly nobody is. But Luis Ariz seems to get his numbers all the time, his teammate there. But somebody like Merrill, that should be the carrying tool, but sometimes you just get saddled with a 270 average because the BABIP was 262 or something. But continue on with your point about him. So thus you believe he needs like 500 plus PAs to really deliver the big value.
Which he's doing, right? He's already at
Right.
519, and there's no reason to think that he won't be an everyday player kind of moving forward. So I mean, I really like Merrill. I think he reminds me a lot of, obviously it's going to be a weird comp, but kind of prime Andrew Benintendi, a guy who...
Dude, I knew you were going to say that. I wish I could have put money on it. That's exactly what I thought you were going to say.
You know, obviously I don't think he's going to fall off the way Benintendi has or anything like that. But like in Andrew Benintendi's prime, he was a second, third round kind of guy. So like,
Right.
yeah, I think, you know, he's one of those guys that I love to kind of draft because you can go a lot of different directions after, right? If you go and draft, you know, like a Jordan, for instance, not that there's anything wrong with drafting Jordan, but like, you know, you need to make up speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you draft a Jackson Merrill, you have a lot of options. Like you can go a lot of different directions with your next few picks. It doesn't kind of pigeonhole you into having to go get
dips
something.
into everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So he's the perfect roster, a balanced roster construction kind of guy. So yeah, he's definitely going to be high up on my board next year. Really looking forward to, you know, digging in more in the offseason as I do my projections on him. But and you got to think that San Diego's just going to keep being competitive. Like, there's no reason to think that they're going to take a dip back. Like, they're going to
push in those chips.
If anything, they're actually going to be better next year because they'll maybe have some better luck or health outcomes in terms of, like, you know, Tatis going down and missing a lot of time this year. So I really like Merrill
for a month almost.
Yeah, I really like Merrill. I think he's going to be one of those guys that I'll be interested to see what the market does with him. I mean, I know we saw him go in the third round of that pull hitter draft, but like I think these guys often kind of get a little overlooked and undervalued just because they don't have like 30 home runs or 30 stolen bases. But like
that cornerstone category that you're talking about,
that batting average can't be understated, especially when he's accumulating the way he is. Like I have a 294 batting average and 600 plus plate appearances. Like in this game, like that gives you such a boost to do different things at the back end of your roster.
Absolutely agree. That's exactly how I see it with Merrill. You know, another interesting comp would maybe be a current teammate, Xander Bogaerts, at his peak. It's a little loose there only because we never saw the power and speed together that much. But I think the way Bogaerts ran, like he had 10, 13, and 15 steals in ages 22 to 24. And was very successful with 2, 4, and 1 caught stealings. If we'd been in an environment that was more conducive to steals, I think he'd have been near 20 with his near 20 power, which we've seen from Merrill. But that kind of guy, and we know what Bogaerts is, right? Like he's just been a steady Eddie for quite some time now. Little down this year, but even this year he rebounded from the depth that he was at. So yeah, we love Merrill. I think we'll be singing his praises all year. And I do agree with you that he is somebody who could sink. I don't know that he will anchor to this price point that the dead pull hitter draft has put him at, because I think people push these guys down a little bit, and I'll jump in on that, Jackson.
Yeah.
If you don't like that, Jackson, you might go elsewhere. And I'm not talking about Holiday. I'm talking about Chourio. Holiday doesn't have enough plate appearances to qualify for this. We'll, of course, review him later. But Jackson Chourio is our next guy. A home run shy of 2020 with 19 homers, 20 steals, and a 279 average, generating a $20 value on the player rater for 15 teamers. So he started slowly. And, you know, with these can't miss guys, quote unquote, it gets nerve-wracking, I think, for folks when they do have a couple dud months, and he did, and I'm sure he was cut in a lot of shallow leagues, and people probably regretted that because Jackson Chourio now has been dialed in for 3+ months, looking great so far, 4 games into this month already with a couple more homers, so he's dialed up, looking great. He's going to go high next year. Where were you on Chourio coming into the year? I think he and Langford were going similarly. I know you favored Langford in that one draft, but you were a little cautious on both. Did you have any vibes with Chourio that led you to drafting him or auctioning him?
I was a little worried about the price. I was a little worried about like his contact rates in the minors. I know that last season they improved, but I didn't know how much of that was just, hey, like you're in AAA and AAA doesn't always have the best pitching around. And And so I was a little worried that he would struggle and then maybe even get set down at some point. But what we've seen is the exact opposite. He's making amazing contact in the zone. That batting average is actually a tad bit unlucky. He should be hitting like in the kind of mid 280s, 287 xBA this year, 87%, 87.5% zone contact. Doesn't swing out of the zone too much. Swing strike rate of 11% is really, really intriguing. And I think this is a guy who is potentially a future star. Hits the ball hard, very consistently. I think the only thing he needs to do is raise his launch angle a little bit. And unlike Jackson Merrill, I don't think he's ever going to be a quote unquote star. I think he's just going to be that premium accumulator kind of guy.
I get the vibe that you're saying, but I think, man, that he's just special. I'm probably just a little drunk on some of these late moments that he's been cultivating lately, because it seems he comes up big every time, including against my Tigers with a huge 3-run homer earlier this week.
So a completely different type of player for Merrill, in terms of what I see his outcome likely to look like.
You're saying Chourio is?
No.
Chourio is different.
No. I'm about to make a different.
You're setting up a comp to Merrill. Excuse me. Go ahead.
And then I'll set up a comp for Chourio as well. So, but obviously different type of player, right? But I see Merrill as a Hunter Pence type. Right?
Okay. I mean, he was the king accumulator in our heyday there during that.
And a guy in real life baseball sense can be really, really popular and a quote unquote star because he does everything great, and he's fun to watch and stuff. But from a fantasy angle, I don't think Merrill's ever a first rounder. Whereas
I think that's fair.
Whereas Chourio, I think Chourio could easily be a first rounder in the future.
I don't know that it'll take that long. I think, if I'm being honest, I think another 3 homers and 5 steals this month would do it. He'll go first round in something, not an ADP of the first round. He went 36th in the pull hitter draft, so he went 13 spots ahead of Chourio. Again, a huge September. Somebody will take him in the first round somewhere for Chourio.
Yeah, because I think Chourio has 60 grade power and 70 grade run, right? So
so gross.
And I think the real question mark on Chourio was the fact that hey, we don't know how much contact he's going to make. He's showing he can make contact, above league average contact in the zone. You add that to his ability to run and his ability to hit for power and in a good home park for power. And I think all of a sudden you're looking at a guy that could potentially be a first rounder. And so I don't think he will be a first rounder next year. So he will definitely be a huge target for me in that second, third round or wherever he's going. But I think that Chourio is, just a small adjustment away from being an absolute superstar.
Yep. I think you're dead on with that. And there's going to be so much excitement that people are going to be betting on the come. I think he ends up with a second round ADP with some first round min picks for Jackson Chourio. I think that's what we see.
Would be totally fine with that.
Yep. I think that's totally fair. You're betting on trying to get that next Bobby Witt who took the big leap in the year 2. I hinted at this other guy because he was the go-to guy in the draft season. Wyatt Langford. Can't miss. Except he did. And you got to go out, take risks, try to secure talent. Players develop quicker than ever these days. But this is exactly what makes me nervous about the top 100 fantasy pick for a rookie. Now, again, the guy we just talked about was also going that high and delivered. $20 season so far. Langford, 10 homers, 12 steals, 248 average, $8 season. So I'm not saying never do it because Langford didn't work. My concern was, and I said it at the time, so I'm not just revisionist, that big minor league run was going to overrate him. That's all. Not that you shouldn't take him in year 1 with no major league experience, none of that. I just worried that sample, as good as it was going to be treated as more meaningful than it was. And injury is a big part of why he hasn't succeeded this year, but even when fully healthy, we haven't seen him carry on those crazy minor league numbers that Langford put up. So again, we talk about how you drafted him in one spot because he fell below ADP.
Yep.
You were not interested in the top 100 picks. You got him at like 120 or something, which at the time was a hefty discount. I think he was closer to 80 ADP when you got him at the 120, which is why you're like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'll get my one share. So we know how that's gone. Do you give him a pass for the injury on Langford? Do you say a little bit of the injury, a little bit of not being ready yet? Like, how does what you've seen this $8 season translate to how you're going to feel about Langford next year?
If there is any sort of dip on his price, on Langford's price from last year, I'm going to be in.
I'm afraid there won't be. Oh,
I think there will be.
I hope you're right.
I think there's going to be enough guys that have popped off unexpectedly this year that we're going to be in a position where Langford, at worst, is at the same ADP as last year. Like,
well, if this draft is any indicator, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's very pertinent to what your point is. 151, and he was going. His main event ADP ended up at 71. So it's one draft, but again, they are the beauty of this draft is they're going to help anchor the initial ADP. And so I think you're right then, because I was concerned. You know who I was concerned that he was going to get the treatment of? O'Neal Cruz. Remember when he didn't really get that much of a discount? Everyone was still betting on him.
I think though that O'Neal Cruz had shown like in really small spurts that he could be a monster, whereas Langford hasn't shown that,
and he at least hit the majors. And nobody ever thought Langford was like 40 steal potential the way we do with Cruz. Yeah. Even though it hasn't come to fruition. But anyway, okay, go ahead on Langford then.
But I do think that Langford has all the tools possible to be a stud. Like, I mean, he has got 60 grade power, 70 grade speed. Like this is a guy, and he makes consistent zone contact. Like he's shown, what he has shown at the major league level is that he makes above average zone contact and does not swing out of the zone at all.
Right.
This has been a weird year in Texas to begin with, right? Like the whole team has just been weirdly down. And I don't think that I think this is just going to be kind of a wash year. And if you get him at a discount, which I think you're going to, even if the price comes up from where that first draft was, like if he's going 130, I'm going to be fine with that price. I'm going to take that price all day long.
Yep, I am too. Again, my main concern was that he'd get O'Neal Cruzed, and then Langford's price would be like 84. So it'd be a round discount, but that's it. Because that's all O'Neal Cruz did. He dipped a little. I was hoping he'd go like outside the top 100. So if Langford does stick more in this area, you said 130, that's a good point. That pushes it up another 20 picks from this spot. If people do get excited again, I will pay that too, because I think he's the real deal. I've been impressed with how he's battled because things did go poorly. He did have the injury, and he's continued to grind. And he's trying to close with a bang, like Chourio. He's off to a fast start this month with 2 homers in 4 games. It's 4 games, but he's trying to close with a bang here. And it's going to have to be the finale for him because Texas is not going to the playoffs. So Langford's going to have to do what he can here in September. Chourio, we didn't even mention it. Same with Merrill. They could get the playoff tax too. If they carry over their strong Septembers into a big playoff, then who knows where their prices go. But okay, at their expected prices, we don't know for sure, your favorite of these 3, because these were the big 3 coming in the year, Merrill, Chourio, and Langford. I feel like Chourio and Langford especially, but then when Merrill looked like he was going to get the job, he kind of jumped up too. At their expected prices, who's your fave here? Is it just Langford on the discount, or do you like one of the studs at a more premium price point?
Yeah, I think it's Langford at the discount. I mean, I love all 3 of these guys. They will all be on teams of mine next season for sure. But, like Chourio, Langford has first-round potential. And to get a first-round potential guy outside the top 100, I think is just too tantalizing to not just take a ton of shots on.
I think you're right. And, I pointed out where I said, like, people are probably going to drop Cruz or Langford because they don't see him as 40 steal potential like Cruz. They probably should. You're 100%. I wasn't saying that because he's not fast. But I think the simple fact is they don't see white dude and think 40 steals. Yeah. And he has real speed. So these 10 homers, 12 steals have come in 462 plate appearances. Now, again, you can extrapolate that and it's not going to get you to what we're talking about. But a fully healthy second season for Langford could easily be, for me, I'm thinking like 27 homers and 34 steals or something. Like,
yeah, I don't think I'm going to project that next year just because he plays on the Rangers and Bruce Bochy doesn't like to run as much. The
true.
Rangers are
That's a great point.
22nd in the league in stolen bases. So, like, for me, it's going to probably be like a 27-15 type of line. But I'll take that, especially because I think it'll come with a good batting average. I think this, 248 or whatever he's hitting right now.
That's low.
Yeah, I think he's more of a 270, maybe even
Agreed.
a 280 guy. So, like, when you're getting that late, and like, unlike Chourio, for Langford, like Langford has like a just a premium launch angle. Like, he's got an 18-degree launch angle. It's perfect for hitting bombs. I think he's going to be really good.
Yeah, there's a lot to like here on Langford with the buyback, so I'm definitely in there. I hope that his 12 for 15 on the bases, like his efficiency, helps Bochy open it up more. But you're right, maybe something in the 30s would have to be a pipe dream as opposed to a projection for Langford, just because you have to take those team context factors into account when you're trying to figure out what the guys are going to do.
I think this last month's going to be really important to watch for Langford because he has spent most of the year batting, somewhere 4th through 7th. The last couple of games, he's batting 2nd. If he's batting 2nd, that opens up a lot of options, including those stolen bases, as well as runs scored. So if we can start projecting him to be batting 2nd next season, then all of a sudden we're looking at a guy who could be a hell of a lot more valuable than he is or has been this season.
That would be hot. By the way, I told you Adolis Garcia sucks. I told you. He's never wrong about that. It only took 3 years, guys.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our next group here. Colton Cowser, guy I love. And even in the midst of like that obscene run he was on, and he was like the player of the moment there in April, we knew he wasn't going to keep up that pace. He did hit a big skid after that. But if you jumped off there and you said, I bought this guy and I missed all the good and I ate all the shit, and you cut him, well, he came back around. He had a huge July, a solid August, and he's trying to land this for a nice season overall. Colton Cowser, 20 homers, 8 steals, 279 average, good for a $12 season. I just listed these guys in kind of a order of how I wanted to talk to them about them, as opposed to like the dollar value or anything. If you're wondering, like, why is the $12 guy behind the $8 guy? Again, Merrill, Chourio, Langford were kind of on their own level. Then I'm doing like the second level guys, and then I got a couple of like flyers at the end here. But Cowser's ended up with a pretty good season. His defense has helped him stay in the lineup pretty much every day. They've got options everywhere, so he gets the occasional off day against lefties with good reason, because he's not particularly strong against them, despite a 338 BABIP, I might add. But 4 homers and 5 steals against them. So you need that volume right now to make Cowser's season what it is. I still see upside in this guy. I do worry that, there's going to be that element against lefties where it is going to cost him sometimes, but I think he can beast on righties enough to be an absolute monster. I'm very excited for Cowser next year. Pick 159 in the pull hitter draft. How'd you feel about Cowser coming into the year? I know timing, let's say not coming into the year, because we were always like, where the fuck's he going to play? How about when he started to get the playing time and was the flavor of the Fab Week that week? Where were you on Cowser from that point forward?
I mean, I was a big fan of Cowser kind of late in draft season. He was on my list of guys that could be like this year's Cedric Mullins or this year's TJ Friedl, a guy going outside of the top 250, top 300 that I felt could really pop. And I got him for really cheap in a lot of my drafts. And then in other leagues that had already drafted, like, he was my first Fab pickup to go out and get. So, like, I've benefited a lot from this, and I held tight. I think that defense that you were discussing in terms of Cowser, like, cannot be understated enough. Like, I agree. Like, it just, you have to like know real baseball and know that his defense will keep him in when he is striking out too much, because that's what he does. He's going to strike out at a 30% clip.
Yep.
But when he makes contact, it's really hard, loud contact. One of the things I really like that I've seen from Cowser in the second half, though, is a little bit of a change of approach where he's just being a little bit more patient and kind of waiting for his pitch. He's still striking out at a 30% clip, but he's increased his walk rate in that. And I think that, he could just continue to kind of develop as a hitter with that approach and continue to be really, really good. I do think he's a guy that like, again, has like really, really, good power potential. We haven't seen it like fully form yet, but I think he's got 60-degree power as well. He's not as fast as, some of the other guys we've talked about in like Langford or Chourio. So I think he's always going to kind of be like a teen stolen base guy at the bat.
Totally agree. 15 max, maybe into the upper teens is what you're looking for with Cowser. But 30 homer pop, I think, is in there. He's developing.
I do.
But it's there for Cowser, and I agree with the defense, and that's why we talk about defense. Two reasons I like to bring up the defensive piece. One, we do have people that don't play fantasy that listen to our show. They want to hear us talk baseball and goof on each other, which I love. That's awesome. So I like to talk about the full elements of their game, but also because it does matter in fantasy, and maybe I'm a prisoner of the moment, but I do feel like it's mattered a bit more recently where teams are favoring some of that defense and letting those better defensive guys get a little bit more burn. Again, maybe it's been happening like that forever. We've always at least incorporated that knowledge of a guy who's an elite defender or a crap defender and how it might impact their playing time. But I think with Cowser, given how difficult it is to crack that lineup, his being elite at defense is a huge help for him. So if he stays around this price point, 150, 160 area, all in. I'm all in 25 picks higher too, by the way. I really, really like Colton Cowser.
I am too.
Next guy, you love this guy. Colt Keith, baby. There's another one where, and I will say this, and I think we say this in March too. I think we can definitely be on record saying it. If you're going to draft these guys, you need to be patient or else don't draft them because you're going to get burned more often than not. If you can't wait out the requisite 2 months that we normally suggest you do for guys that you take, with a decent level pick, and obviously always kind of depends. He went later than I thought. 298 was the main event average for Colt Keith. But if he was one of your dudes, the way he was with Justin, if you were fully bought in and you're cutting him after 2 weeks, then you really weren't bought in. I know you held him, right, throughout everything until he turned.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you loved him, and so you're going to see more than a month. And it was a wretched first month, 387 OPS. But what sold me was, first off, 192 BABIP. He was unlucky. I watched the Tigers every day. I knew he was hitting into some bad luck. The other thing was they stayed committed to him. He didn't lose an ounce of playing time. He was still starting against lefties. Everything, and of course, the contract helped with that too. The Tigers are fully bought in on Colt Keith. So he turned the season around. Huge May, back down again in June, another June swoon there. But then huge up in July, decent in August, and it's been 2 games here in September that he's played. So those 2 months the 2 excellent months have stabilized his line, and now we have 12 homers, 7 steals, and a 259 average from Colt Keith. That's a $5 season, so it hasn't fully panned out, but you've seen the elements of everything that you loved, specifically you, because, again, you were a big champion of Colt Keith. How do you feel from what we've seen out of 482 plate appearances from your boy?
Oh, man, this is one. I need to find that card. I don't know if we talked about this, but did you see that person that sent me the Colt Keith rookie card? Like a picture. No. He sent me a picture of it. So the original, I think it's the original Topps rookie card of Colt Keith was written Keith Colt.
Oh my God, that's so funny, dude.
So I need to go get me a Keith Colt rookie card. I'll find the tweet.
Oh my God. Yeah, because I'm trying to look for it too. I think that is so funny.
It is absolutely hilarious. And just perfect on
for those that don't know, Justin calls him Keith Colt 62% of the time he references him. A player he loves, by the way. I do not, and I'm not saying that to suggest that he doesn't love him. He does. He's fully bought in. Can't remember his name to save his life. And in fairness to Justin, Keith is a first name, not a last name.
Exactly. I mean, I love how 2 guys on this list like have like, first name, last names, like that could easily, like Jackson Merrill could usually be Merrill Jackson.
Merrill Jackson all day.
Like
absolutely
could easily. So, but as far as Colt Keith goes, if you look at what he's done since July, and you mentioned he had a down June, but since July, he's making 89% zone contact. He's only swinging outside the zone 25% of the time. A pretty nice 69% zone swing rate.
Hell yeah.
Means he's being aggressive on those pitches in the zone. 8 home runs, hitting 292, 347, 465. I mean, everything is lining up for Colt Keith to be an absolute stud. Another one of these guys who I don't want to say he has 60 grade power. He has 70 grade power. Now he's he's not going to run much. Like he's not a stolen base dude, but he'll chip in some. He's gonna be eligible just at second next year, which is totally fine. But I love him, and especially if you like look at his splits this year.
I was going to get to that. Yeah,
tell
everyone what he's doing.
Murdering left-handed pitching.
It's been great, and there is a huge BABIP, so that won't last 455.
Yeah.
But if you watch Colt Keith's at bats against lefties, he is so dialed in. Like he's made it a point for that not to be a problem for him. Versus righties has been down a bit, 681 on the season. Wait till that clicks in, because I don't think he's just going to be one of these weird guys who only goes lefty-lefty.
That's a low BABIP. He's got a 281 BABIP. I think it's probably more
those will balance.
BABIP. Yeah. And you're going to just have an absolute stud. Like the contact skills on this kind of power can't be understated, especially at a weak position like second base. Like I think that this is just definitely a guy I love. I'm going to target. I don't think he's going to be overly pricey. I don't know where he went in that draft, but
he didn't go, and I don't blame them. I really don't, because like based on what he's doing here, like here's the second baseman the last three second basemen that went: Xander, Nico Horner, and Semien. And I love Keith, but I'm taking all three of those above him. However, he might be like, if they did rounds 12 and 13, and again, they will. This will be a full draft. But I think we're right around the time where he goes there. I would take him somewhere in the 12th to 15th round range, depending on what the market is asking. And, I might even pay an 11th round pick. You don't have to right now. So if you don't do it. But I would pay upwards of the 11th round, I think, for Keith. I really believe in him, and I'm so excited about the Tigers having him.
Yeah, you should be very excited about the Tigers having him. I think that contract's going to look really, really good in a few years for you guys. So
very excited for it. Let's talk about Ceddanne Rafaela, who Tim Kanak was the one who put me on him. I think last year maybe, and I remember bringing him up saying, hey, keep tabs on this guy. Tim told me Rafaela's a dude, and I remembered him from Out of the Park Baseball for his defense, because his defense is excellent. He can play literally any position and play it very well. Infield, outfield, all of it. So like has these skills that are kind of like getting him into the lineup. And then when he gets in the lineup, he's a bit raw, but he has power and speed. 14 homers, 17 steals, 253 average on the way to a $13 season here for Rafaela. I can't remember how you felt about him coming into the year. So re-enlighten me on that before we dive into what we're doing with him next year. Ceddanne Rafaela.
So Rafaela was one of these guys that early on in draft season, I got a lot of shares of, right? Like, so he's on a lot of my DC teams because he was going super, super cheap. Like
free,
he was
like literally free, not just in free, which is like the fourth round.
He was like literally looked at as kind of the odd man out, but he has these amazingly loud tools. Like he has got a ton of power and speed, well, maybe not a ton of power, but he's got a ton of speed, good amount of power, and like he can play premium defense in a number of different spots. And I was all like, you know what? If I'm the Red Sox and I'm looking at the Red Sox lineup, I want a guy like Ceddanne Rafaela playing every day. And so I took a lot of gambles. Then as draft season like really started to wear on and start getting to March, the hype on him went crazy. And that's where I backed off and kind of hit the brakes. I wasn't going to pay, like he was going like top 150 in some of my drafts, like even in the top 100 in some of my late drafts. And I was like, yeah, I'm not paying that. There's the problem with Rafaela is even though those tools are really loud, the one tool that isn't is
your favorite tool. Yes,
is my favorite tool. And like, so like, here's the thing. Who does he remind me of? Reminds me of a guy you hate and have already slandered on the podcast.
Tony Garcia.
Which is a guy who has really loud tools, but he can't always get to them because he isn't a guy that is going to make enough contact to get on base enough. He swings outside of the zone 45% of the time, Rafaela does, which, it's another guy that I have faded for, a number of years that other people keep going back to the well on in Michael Harris. It's a guy that just swings outside of the zone way too much. Now, Harris has also dealt with injuries that have kept him down and Rafaela hasn't, but I think he's going to be one of these. I think Rafaela is going to be one of these guys that long term, until he fixes that, if he fixes that, because this isn't something you can always fix,
Correct.
is going to be maddening. And is going to, especially like for those of you who play head-to-head leagues, I know we talk a lot of roto, but I'm really trying to, like, when we have guys that play better in one category or another, like Rafael is not a guy I would ever roster in a head-to-head league, because he could win you a week or lose you a week.
Right.
And like, I would much rather have the Jackson Merrill kind of prototype of a guy that, hey, he's never going to be the guy that wins me a week, but he's always going to be contributing.
Right.
So for me, Rafael is one of those guys. It's going to really depend on where his price is. And honestly, it's going to kind of depend on what Boston does in the offseason. If Boston like starts to load up, I'm going to be a little worried about where Rafael's playing time consistently comes from.
That's also true, because injuries are part of why he's playing. And like you said earlier in the draft, or in March part of draft season, before or after you'd already taken him in DCs, when you were just kind of speculating and it's a 50-round draft and hold, we were concerned about the playing time. Well, then the injuries started to strike, chief among them being, of course, the Trevor Story injury. And that's opened the door for Rafaela
and Von Grisham never got off the ground.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. He so didn't get off the ground that I forgot about him, to be honest. So yeah, that's a great point. And they'll keep Grisham and Story's under contract, of course, too. So then the outfield looks to be the place for Rafaela. Okay, but then they got Abreu, Duran, Tyler O'Neill. Is Tyler O'Neill a free agent?
I don't believe he is.
Okay, so then
but I'm double checking right now.
If he isn't, then we're talking like that's another. So then where does Rafaela play? And at pick 112, and
O'Neill is a free agent.
Okay. So then that's Rafaela's spot right now, I would think.
Yeah. I would assume so.
Let me be clear. I'm not suggesting he doesn't play. I'm suggesting he might not play every single day with Rafaela. He's going to play. He's too valuable, even if he Swiss Army knives around the diamond Ben Zobrist stuff.
I think he is going to be like a Swiss Army knife. Like I would be really surprised if Boston doesn't go out and get another bat for that outfield, right? Like,
right.
Especially when you have a guy like Rafaela who can go and play. Like, they can go get, a Tyler O'Neill-esque type of player, maybe a lefty.
Or just Tyler himself.
Or just bring Tyler O'Neill back.
He did well with them.
Yeah, so
very well, in fact.
Yeah.
Always buy the dip on O'Neill. I will not have him sorry, I interrupted you twice in a row. I will not have him anywhere next year. Always buy the dip. When he's down is when you buy O'Neill. Never on a high season. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think O'Neill's going to be expensive though, because
that's a fair point. He's not coming off of a 34-15 season the way he was in 2021. That's when I was like, I'm not paying this second round price tag. But yeah, with Rafaela, I don't know that he'll stay at the 112. Like, I don't think that'll become his ADP. So if he is cheaper, 130, 140 getting you there with Rafaela?
I think it would really depend on like team context, right?
I think so too. What do I need at that moment?
The batting average is going to be an issue for him. I know he's hitting 253 right now, but he's got a 236 XBA, and that is much more in line with his skills, right? Like, we're talking about a guy who hovering around at 80% zone contact, swing outside the zone 40% of the time, 18% swing and strike rate. Like, these are all numbers that tell me like this, like, hey, yeah, he could hit 250 like he is this year. He could also hit 215.
Agreed.
So,
now, the defense should keep him at the majors and playing, but that is definitely a risk with Ceddanne Rafaela. Definitely agree there.
Walk. You have almost as many walks as he does.
He's not a fan of it.
3% walk rate. So, like, there is a really low floor for a guy like Rafaela. And for me, a guy in the top 150, I don't really want.
Shouldn't have that low of a floor.
I don't want that low of a floor. Now, I think the defense does help just keep him playing, or at least keep him on the roster. But like, there is like a risk of being sent to the minor leagues, and there's also a risk of just becoming like a super utility defensive guy,
right?
Which you would hate,
right? Where he's getting like an at bat a day because he comes in late for somebody. Gets an at bat maybe, but like, yeah, it could be a little bit nerve wracking there. I will say at the 112 price point that he was in this draft, I'm not having Rafaela anywhere. No, but if it gets cheaper, I could start to maybe bring him into focus. But there's just other guys I like. A lot of guys on this list I just like better at their respective prices. Our boy, go ahead, finish up on Rafaela.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think everybody we've talked about, I like considerably more than Rafaela.
Absolutely. Price considered, like even the
Yeah.
more expensive Merrill and Chourio and all that. Yep,
Yeah.
totally agree. Including this guy too, our boy, Michael Busch. We were desperate for him to get out of LA if they weren't going to play him. It was clear they weren't. Now he got out like a house on fire and slowed a little bit, but overall it's still been a strong season. Now I think both of us would have put him down for something in the mid-20s if I'd guaranteed you 500 plate appearances. He could still get there, but he's 4 away from 20 right now with just 16. But it's 16, 2 steals, and a 249 average, which isn't too bad for a power guy like him. Good for a $9 season for Michael Busch. I feel like it's been a win. Like if you drafted him, this $9 value has returned what you paid for Michael Busch, who was picked 356 in the main event. So he's definitely paid his returns. What's the next step here? Because I know you loved him coming in the year. We've been a fan of this guy for 4 years. Where do we go from here? Does he build on this? Are you worried by the power being a little bit underwhelming there? Or do you think he builds on it, maybe puts up that 25, 30 homer season that we've thought he could have for quite some time?
I think the power is in there to be a 30 homer guy at some point in his
Fully
career.
agree.
And while he is striking out at 30% clip, he is making around league average zone contact, and he doesn't swing outside of the zone too much.
And he walks,
Swing,
yeah.
Yeah, swing strike rate is 11.5%. Like you said, he walks. Like I think that everything is there for I feel less confident that he will reach those marks than maybe the other guys then on the list, but I think the price is going to reflect that kind of lack of certainty on a guy like Michael Busch as opposed to the other guys who are going to be going, I think, probably much higher. So I think I'm going to have a lot of Michael Busch again next year. I think there's no reason to think he's not going to kind of be in that lineup pretty regularly. I know there are defensive concerns for him, so it'll be interesting to see what the Cubs do, but they've pretty much let him play every single day at first base, and I don't think there's much reason why to think that he can't continue to do that.
Don't sign Pete. I love Pete, by the way. This is not an anti-Pete take, but don't take Bush's job, please. Because I think
if they sign a guy like Alonso and bring in him, I think they jettison out an outfielder so that way
to clear the space for Busch.
Yeah, so Busch can
That's
DH
fair.
and Suzuki goes out to the outfield. And I want to is Ian Happ, I think, a free agent? I think so.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right.
He is. Yeah. Oh no, he's not. He's not.
He's not.
He's signed through 20.
Oh, he signed a 3-year extension. Yep. Yeah. Sorry about that. I totally forgot.
But I think Suzuki could be a guy that they trade, right? Like,
agreed.
Depending on what Bellinger, because doesn't Bellinger have an opt out? I believe Bellinger has an opt out.
That is a good question.
He has player options in 2025 and 2026. So it'll.
You think he opts out?
Maybe not. It depends on what the market looks like. I know there's
a lot okay, but he wasn't the guy we saw last year. Right.
Well, he's missed a lot of time with injury this year, even though it doesn't necessarily show up in the stats. He's been battling injuries quite a bit. So I could see him just opting in for this year.
Agreed.
and then trying to retest the market, especially because there is a lot of talk that I don't know if you have seen any of this, but I saw it recently of teams saying they're not going to spend money because there's so many of the regional sports packages that have failed because of the Bally's thing and stuff.
Right.
That it may be a really, really gross off season once again. Where guys don't sign until late, or especially some of the big guys. So
how do you feel about the Chapman deal then? Y'all went out and jumped him early.
I feel like my brother-in-law was bitching about it, and I get it because he's 31 and he signed a 6-year contract.
Right. I don't love the term, the length, but I really don't mind the dollars.
I don't mind the dollars, and by the time he is 35, 36, $25 million a year, I don't think it's going to be that.
Also a good point, right?
And his calling card is defense, and defense typically ages fairly well. So I'm not,
if you're at the tippy top scale and you can stay healthy, which he has. The easiest comp is like a Nolan Arenado, right? Because they play top of the scale defense. They even hit similarly. And
Yeah.
take somebody like him these last 2 years. You wouldn't say like, oh my God, Nolan Arenado rules, because he hasn't. He's been about a 2.5 WAR type of guy. The dollars per WAR that delivers is about 20 mil. So yeah, it still falls shy of the 25, but it wouldn't kill you if he goes and churns out a couple of 2.5, 2 WAR seasons there for Chapman. So I liked that they went out and jumped early there and locked him.
As much as I'm not a big Snell guy, like I wouldn't mind them doing that on Snell too. Snell's definitely going to opt out.
Right. So lock it in before all this potential madness. I think you got to build something a little bit more friendly there to maybe get out of it with Snell just because of his history with injury. I hope he gets his bread for sure. But like, I understand if the team's like, okay, for me, I'd rather pay him more per year and really shorten that down to like a 4-year thing.
Or have like, after the third year, like the fourth year being a mutual option.
I was just about to say, yeah.
We both like this. We want to keep it going for another 3 years or something like that.
Agreed.
Would make a lot of sense. So
things like that like if he does find some second half health, which has happened with pitchers before. I mean, Zach Wheeler used to be like, don't trust him at all. And he's now the horse of the league. I think some people forget that because I have to remind myself sometimes. So, it could happen. But anyway, back to our hitters here. We're done with Michael Busch. We're totally back in again next year. Masyn Winn is the leader in plate appearances of this group, 552. Because when you can throw 100 miles an hour from shortstop, your defense is locking you in. Did you see that relay throw he made yesterday?
I didn't.
It was 97, and it was an absolute pellet, dude. It was awesome. His athleticism is just off the charts. 12 homers, 10 steals, a nice 277 average for 552 plate appearances as well for Masyn Winn. That's a little $12 piece there that's definitely clicking in for folks because he was a waiver pickup most places. He was drafted in main events at pick 355, but I think he was cut in a lot of them. Maybe not all of them. In fact, I would certainly say not all of them, but like, I think he popped up on the wire. Didn't he start slow? Am I misremembering? No, I'm misremembering. He had 304 in April.
He wasn't drafted in a lot of leagues.
That's probably what it is then. Okay, because he started off hot.
So this is another guy who is on a lot of my DC teams, but not on a lot of my Fab teams. Not because like the price went up, but because he didn't really factor into a ton of Fab leagues, right? Like,
right. And you had your shares in case he popped, but we didn't really know what to expect out of him.
You mostly thought like, hey, Masyn Winn's a really good defensive player, and they're committing to him at shortstop because the only other shortstop they brought in was Brandon Crawford.
But Edman was also lurking to returns, and we didn't think Edman would be out damn near the whole year the way he was too.
Yeah, but we knew Edman could go out into the outfield too, or play.
That's also true. But they had superstar Dylan Carlson there, and I rightly know that he is one of the greatest players ever, and nobody would ever play ahead of him.
Cardinals is such a weird team. Like, just like looking at like what they were at the start of the year and what they've turned out to be. But as far as Masyn Winn goes, like, I think he is, I don't know, like a diet version of Merrill Jackson, right?
Right.
I did it. Jackson.
Merrill. Oh, I thought you did it on purpose. Oh my God, I thought you did it on purpose. That's so good. That's so good. I think you're 100% right. Like an accumulator who's in there for his defense. Yeah. And we see with the 552 plate appearances that 277 average is going to have nice value over that time in a 15-teamer. Do you think there's more in either the power or the speed? And if so, which for Masyn Winn?
Maybe the speed.
Okay.
And I'll have to double check, but Cardinals, I don't believe have been a team that have been running necessarily a ton this year.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Yeah, there's 17 sorry, I have to actually sort it by. Yeah, the 22nd tied for. They're tied with Texas, right?
So right. There you go.
Like they run a little, but they don't run very much, and so like, and who knows what they're going to do in terms of a manager if they're going to switch that out again or not.
They kept Ali Marmol after last year, and this year they actually got better, so they might be like, oh, we're improving. Let's keep this guy. I'm still not a fan. I'm sorry, folks. I'm just not. But anyway, Masyn Winn. Is he somebody that you think you're drawn? Are you drawn toward a guy like that, or not so much because it's kind of bland?
In 15-team leagues, like as an MI, I think he makes sense because I do think where Masyn Winn does have upside is in batting average. Like I think he could, he leads off on a team. He has more speed than I think that we've seen in terms of the raw stolen base numbers, but he makes 90% zone contact.
Oh my
Like
goodness.
it's like that's really, really good zone contact.
Right.
And we do think the Cardinals will be better. I hope they should be next season. So like I'm interested in that regard, right? Like I
feel
think
that.
I think he could be just a guy that is a glue guy kind of towards the back end of your roster. And that makes a lot of sense in your deeper leagues. In your 10s and 12s, probably not. I just don't think there's enough juice there.
And with regards to Masyn Winn, I don't think the price is gonna be particularly high.
No.
Because he didn't go in the 11 rounder, and I don't think that was like a glaring miss or anything. I agree that like he could be that nice glue piece that you put in and just say, hey, give me 600 plate appearances of solid work. And then in the right season, he hits 310, and then you feel amazing about Masyn Winn at that point.
If I was guessing his ADP, I'd say like 225.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm paying that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Like
I'm certainly not against that.
Especially on certain builds, like he's going to make a lot of sense to offset bad batting averages you might have taken earlier.
Say that part again. I'm sorry.
I said it, especially in certain builds where you've maybe taken bad batting averages early on. Like he's a good guy to kind of offset that.
Right. Yeah, so Masyn Winn, I think we're pretty keen on what he could possibly do because the price point just doesn't seem like it's going to be crazy. These last two guys are a little bit, well, and Mason was part of it too, the later picks, but I think even these two are going to be later. Nolan Schanuel, 12 homers, 5 steals, 246 average, $6 season. PT is there, right? So he is, the deep leagues that we play in, he's the kind of guy that if you just want someone who's playing every day, there could be some intrigue there because I don't think his price point is going to be anything really. Like I think he'll be in the 300s as he should be. But do you see anything there? Do you want the 600 plate appearances from Nolan Schanuel, or is he just too boring?
I think he's too boring in most formats. Especially at first base, though. I mean, first base isn't what it used to be, right? But you usually want some power from first base, and he is kind of a boring accumulator. I could see it work in certain builds, but we're talking about a guy who's probably going to finish the year with like 15 home runs and 6 stolen bases. The batting average should be better. Like I think he's probably a 270 type of hitter, especially with how much zone contact. But there is no pop, or not no pop, but there's very little pop, especially for a first baseman.
Fair. Like you saying no pop, I will let you get away with that. Like I don't think that's hyperbolic. Like okay, saying no, I guess is hyperbolic because he hit 12 homers, but the dude just does not have punch. And when you're talking about a first baseman, a 16 homer upside just ain't doing it for me. Casey Kochman, James Loney, like that's who he is, right? Those type of guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think for sure he is those kind of guys. I'm actually looking up his Savant page as we speak because
I'll be surprised if you have anything nice to say when you see it.
I'm sure it's going to say exactly what I'm thinking, kind of off the top of my head, which is that so his average exit velocity is in the 8th percentile. His barrel percentage is in the 10th percentile. His hard hit percentage is in the 4th percentile. His bat speed, which is a really cool new metric that they've got, 1st percentile.
Yikes, dude. And first is bad in this instance.
Yeah. I mean,
doesn't swing hard.
His max exit velocity is 104. It's really, really bad. So like he's a real life good player, right? Plays every day, he walks a lot, he doesn't strike out, and makes a lot of contact. I do think there's going to be good batting averages. But I think that's it. I think he's an empty batting average guy.
Yep. I think so too. And at first base especially, or even corner, no. I'm just not that interested in it for Nolan Schanuel. So it's past there for me for sure, even at the deep price point. Maybe a DC where I will just take the volume, but that's it.
That's the perfect place for it. It's a DC.
I agree. But this last guy I am interested in because You talk about the team context with stealing, and you hit on it for a couple guys that are on the negative end, where we have to be careful that they might not be able to run because their managers just don't really push for that. If you play in Washington right now, you are being allowed to run to your heart's content, and that has helped deliver quite a season for Jacob Young. 3 homers, 31 steals, 263 average, and a $10 value here. Oh, by the way, did you know that Snell left after an inning? 42 pitch first inning.
No,
Yikes.
it did not.
I mean,
Injury
42
or
pitches.
or they just pulled him?
They just took him out. They didn't say it was an injury. I think it's just one of the protection things. Like, hey, we suck. He threw 42 pitches in the first. He has a history.
I'm fine.
Let's
I'm
get
fine.
him out.
I'm fine with that. Like, hey,
I think it's fine too.
We're under 500 right now. We're not making the playoffs.
If he's actually healthy,
sell him at the deadline. But whatever.
Fair point. But yeah. Anyway, sorry. I just saw that and I was like, why is Landon Rope pitching? But anyway, Jacob Young has been a godsend on the bases this year with the 31 steals. Are you buying into this?
Yeah, I mean, I am in some regards. One, like you said, the Nationals just steal. Like
Jesse
love
Winker, like 13 steals or whatever the hell it was.
They have 189 stolen bases here. It's first in baseball. And it's not like it's just like Ellie De La Cruz on the Reds running wild, right?
Right.
This is like everybody's contributing. A guy like Jacob Young, who nobody was talking about prior to the season, stealing over 30 bases. He makes really good in zone contact, 89%, doesn't swing outside of the zone about a quarter of the time. He's pretty passive at the plate, just generally speaking. Which is fine when your calling card is stolen bases, right? Because I think that walk rate should go up a little bit. I think he's been a little unlucky. I'd be interested to kind of see why exactly he's been so passive inside and outside of the zone, but yet not walking higher than a 6% rate. I think that I'd probably project that to go up. The problem is he has zero punch.
Yeah, no punch whatsoever with Jacob Young. So this is a fit pick where you have to have over-indexed on power, and you can take on the 4 homers from this roster spot, and you have to make sure they're made up elsewhere. That's the tough part about these guys. That's always been my issue with Rabbits, but I also don't think he's going to be very expensive. And my bigger issue with Rabbits has always been that they're too expensive, some of the premier versions of this guy. But I don't think Jacob Young's price is soaring through the roof. So I'd be interested in taking him in the right spot to get that speed infusion.
Well, he is in a lot of ways kind of very similar to Colton Cowser in terms of he's going to play every day because of that defense.
Right, which is awesome.
If you look at his Savant page, which I have up now because I looked up Schanuel's, he has 100% fielding or 100% fielding run value.
Oh my goodness.
So he is a premium defender at a position where teams like premium defenders. He isn't going to be a guy who strikes out a lot. So I think he can be very, very valuable in this Washington lineup. You're going to have to make the power up somewhere else, but
right.
He's one of those guys hey, if you take a Jordan early on,
maybe
you move up a Jacob Young a couple rounds and kind of take him and offset that.
2 of your first 3 guys are 35 homer dudes that you're getting a combined 8 steals from. That's where Jacob Young fits. So it's a team context fit, but there is a fit here. And I love the point that you make about his defense because it is sparkling, and that is going to get him PT. Because I know that's probably the number one question is well, is he going to, they found this guy out of nowhere. They still going to play him next year? I think it's Wood, Young, Cruz as their outfield. I don't know why it wouldn't be. I don't think I'm missing anybody that they have to slot in there.
You definitely want to kind of take a look and see what the Nationals do in the offseason, right? If they bring in a guy who can play center, then maybe you start to go,
Sure, that's fair. Wait, is this Darren Baker on their team? Is that Dusty's kid? Oh, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
I missed that. Yeah, he's only been up for 2 games, so I didn't miss much. But that's so great. For those that don't know, JT Snow made little baby Darren Baker famous one year for protecting his life because boy was about to get steamrolled, being the little bat boy out there while the ball was in play and the runs were coming in, and JT Snow
in the
just runs
World
by him.
Series, like it's
In the World Series against the Angels, just yoinks him up there, and you see twerpy little Darren Baker go, whoa, and now here he is in the majors. Fuck, we are old. But anyway, there we go. There's 10 guys. Really interesting rookie class. I think we got a lot more hitting this year than pitching. We've talked about it throughout the year. We talked about it going into the year, even in that Dynasty redraft prospects to know piece that I talked about earlier. I wrote at the very beginning, I said, after last year's banner class, don't expect anything like that this year. Like once we get past Skeens, and I said Jackson Jobe at the time too, because those were the top two guys.
Yeah.
Obviously we didn't get Jobe this year, but I was like, after them, we're turning over rocks hoping to land on something. You know, you got a nice Gavin Stone situation there. We got Luis Heel obviously popping up. I don't even know if he's rookie eligible anymore.
Fest has been good.
There's been some hits, but again, I reiterate what we were looking at last year when it was like every single week was putting in something. Schwellenbach's been nice. Mitchell Parker's been nice. Spencer Arrighetti's turned it around. So like there's been guys, Jared Jones, but not nearly as many as there were on hitting this year. Hitting was a lot more robust, and I figure we could review these guys because even with a month left, they've all hit 450 plate appearances. So we'll do more rookie review down the line, but tomorrow we're back with the two-step guys. We'll get you set up for next week because we only have 3 more bid periods.
Whew.
3 more. And you were telling me earlier offline that you are in the mix in like every league, but ranging as high as winning to being out of the money though. And every league is that tight for you right now.
It's going to be very, very stressful for me. So I'm definitely looking forward to the season being over because the next few weeks are going to be pretty hectic. But then we get to start digging in on the off season.
Right. And I'm excited for that.
Yeah, a lot of pods are going to go dark. You and I won't. And I will be like literally on September 30th, I will be starting my projections. I may even start it a little bit early. Who knows?
I've already started putting in some like preliminary stuff into the Excel of like where, you know, getting the pitcher lists going so that I can have the rankings up. At least the first run, there's not going to be like commentary with it, but it'll be something that you can use if you're doing DCs in September, October. We're going to get our tiered ranking lists going again. I love the season, obviously, but off-season deep dives, it's a lot of fun, and I like that we keep doing the pod. In October, we'll probably be at 1 ep a week before we dial it back up after the Arizona Fall League. We get a little break, but we try not to go dark for any more than like a week max, really. Like we just try to stay going. So we'll be back tomorrow morning. Two-step pitchers. Justin, have a great one. I'll talk to you later.
Take it easy.